So today's presentation is going to be on emergency drinking water purification and long-term storage. The reason for the overkill setup of all the AV equipment is I'm recording this for the people that weren't able to make it today. Too bad for them, they're not going to be able to partake in the charcuterie board. My name is Nick Cohenmeyer. The reason why I'm giving this presentation is I was in the Navy for 16 years. I have experience with expeditionary warfare, and with expeditionary communities, you're basically required to just go anywhere in the world, set up in a oftentimes kind of primitive location. One of the first things is you need to secure a water source, and you generally cannot rely on clean potable water. That's assumed that you will not have clean water. So the parallels from that to this presentation are that in the event of a water crisis, which includes the obvious things like fire, earthquake, natural disaster, more likely is going to be some kind of problem with the municipality, as has happened in Flint, as has happened in Hawaii, in Camp Lejeune, even in San Diego last year.
Texas.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And so there could either be no water altogether, in which you have to start procuring alternative sources, which I'm going to talk about some sources you may not have considered within your house alone. And then you may have water, but you have to assume it's not going to be safe to drink. So you have to filter it, you have to purify it. And we'll talk about how to do those in the simplest way possible. I have learned what absolutely does not work at great expense of my time, of my money. And by coming to these presentations, my goal is to help you just learn what works so you can avoid what doesn't. Basically, just kind of skip to the head of the line. And the fact that you're already here is a huge step ahead from what the public is going to be facing. So I'll show you some videos from recent events where people had to learn the hard way because something that had never happened before they assumed never would. So wise people learn from their mistakes, but the very wise learn from the mistakes of others. So when you started learning your career, your hobby, you were probably terrible at it. You probably failed more often than you succeeded. And that's the same approach that applies to prepping. But if you can learn from someone who has already made more mistakes than you, it's only to your benefit. So this presentation is going to be divided into 6 parts. And that's because people that are watching this presentation are going to have varying degrees of baseline knowledge. So there's going to be people who already understand the differences between a Berkey filter and what you can do with, a Aquatainer, what you can do with just an off-the-shelf, like a Brita filter. And there's other people that probably assume that a Brita filter will filter contaminated water, or that you can filter your swimming pool water with a Brita. There's all kinds of misconceptions. You can filter swimming pool water, but not with a Brita. And you can filter and purify in one device. You can also desalinate seawater with a specific device, which I'm going to talk about later and briefly. So I'm going to start with number 1. I'm not going to cover all these today. I'm just going to get through maybe 1 and 2, and if you want me to keep going, I will. But eventually I'll record all 6 of these. I'll put them up on YouTube. So some of you will be watching this from YouTube, and if you do, I hope you'll at least give it a like. So a water crisis is more likely and more common than you might assume. And there's a few reasons for this. But let me show you one example, what happened in West Virginia.
Meanwhile, significant new developments this morning in a chemical spill that has forced 300,000 people to stop drinking water out of the taps in their homes. Overnight, we learned that more than 700 people have reported symptoms of illness and 70 have gone to the hospital. ABC's Susan Salney is on the scene in West Virginia.
So in West Virginia, basically, the residents went to bed with clean, potable water, thinking they would wake up and drink the same water that they've always drank. And they drank it because they didn't have any warning. It didn't smell, it didn't look bad, there wasn't any turbidity in the water. It looked just automatic. They put it in their coffee, they gave it to their pets, and then they went to the hospital. So that's how they found out. Oftentimes, it's not that the authorities are alerting the residents, it's the other way around. The residents are alerting the authorities, or the authorities are figuring out, wait, there's some kind of problem because the hospital suddenly is overrun with GI issues. Now, this is fortunately happening in normal times. If you are drinking contaminated water during an emergency where it's a mass casualty event, there's chaos, the hospitals are overrun, you are basically going to be on your own. And water is one of the quickest ways to perish if you aren't drinking properly purified and filtered water. So that's why, next to oxygen, water is probably your second priority. Now, once residents became aware of the water contamination, and those who didn't prepare for a water outage or crisis like this, they had to instantly scramble to locate whatever water containers they could and clean them. And how are you going to clean your water containers without clean water? So they basically had to get whatever containers they could. Oftentimes it's like old, expired milk jugs. There's all kinds of problems with using milk jugs like this, right? They're made incredibly thin. They're not designed to last. They are going to harbor bacteria. They're very hard to clean. You can sanitize them with bleach, but it's last resort. Why depend on the last resort when you can prepare and do so much better now? So the residents would basically have to get in their cars, get in line, wait for whatever handouts they could get.
For the 300,000 area residents, it's been a frustrating day and a half. Overnight, FEMA trucks bringing more than 1 million liters of clean water for people to drink, bathe, cook, and clean.
I get really upset because we're basically just trying to find water just so we can be able to, take a shower, have something to drink.
So again, there will always be people who don't think about what they might do in a water crisis because they don't think one will happen to them. And it's understandable that we would assume that something that has never happened never will. So in Toledo, Ohio, there was an algae bloom in Lake Erie, and that led to the temporary loss of water for 500,000 residents.
Toxic tap water is forcing hundreds of thousands of residents in Toledo, Ohio, to use bottled water to drink and bathe. City officials warned residents Saturday not to use water from their taps after a treatment plant discovered high levels of toxins.
And then, I don't know if anybody remembers San Diego just last year, boil water notice, and look at the line of cars.
A boil water advisory remains in effect tonight for portions of the South Bay and Coronado. Good evening and thanks so much for joining us on this Friday. I'm Marcella Lee.
And I'm Jesse Pagan in for Carlo Cicchetto. The advisory is for people who get their water from California American Water. The company is now handing out free cases of water to people affected with long lines spanning blocks today. Meantime, local leaders like Imperial Beach Mayor Paloma Aguirre want answers. She wants the city council to investigate.
You're going to be at the mercy of whatever supplies are allocated to you. You're going to be at the mercy of the quantity of them. They're going to be exhausted. So public handouts of supplies can be inconvenient at best and life-threatening at worst during the chaotic aftermath following many emergencies. Basically, the more you're able to prepare now to take care of your family's essential needs during a crisis, the less you'll be forced to leave them temporarily behind in order to venture out into the public for emergency handouts of essential resources that you didn't stock beforehand. So this all ultimately means less unnecessary risks and discomfort that you and your family will be subjected to. So that is the end of the first part of the presentation. And shall I continue to part two? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My voice or the video? Okay. All right, let me know if it's too loud.